It is. And we're going to discuss, it's kind of interesting, yeah, we'll discuss that later. It's kind of an interesting point to make and to look at. Now, Patrick Henry, he said this so beautifully. He says this, "Are we at last brought to such humiliating and debasing degradation that we cannot be trusted with arms for our defense?" Wait a second. Where's the difference between having our arms in possession and under our direction and having them under the management of Congress? If our defense be the real object of having those arms, in whose hands can they be trusted with more propriety or equal safety to us as in our own hands? Have you guys heard that quote before? That's an awesome quote, isn't it? I always say about these quotes, I need to make them into bumper stickers, but they kind of a big wrap, right? The whole entire wrap around the car. This is a great quote. If the whole point of having arms is to protect ourselves, in whose hands are they most useful than in our hands? Why would the government need to? No, I'm going to protect myself, thank you, right? He gets it, he nails it. Now, as far as defining what a militia is, that term militia wasn't defined in the Constitution, but it was very common in the state statutes of the day. There were 5 critical elements about these in the state statutes about what a militia is. And here's what they are. And these are critical to understand what a militia really is by definition. First one is all able-bodied men between 16 to 55 years of age required to be in the militia. Okay, those years change. Those are different. Sometimes in Massachusetts they're younger, and in Virginia older, etc. But in general, those are about the years of age of all able-bodied males required to be in the militia. The second, it was a man's duty to arm himself and have his firearm and ammunition available at a moment's notice. Remember Minuteman? They're ready to go immediately. It was their job to arm themselves. Do you know the people who couldn't afford to have arms, do you know what happened? The community got together and provided work projects for them to do to earn their arms. Novel concept. Isn't that cool? Right? No free lunches here. Third one, periodic training was required. Fourth one, periodic inspections. This is kind of interesting. Periodic inspections are made and fines assessed if the firearm and ammunition were not in proper working condition and available for use. You can imagine a government official saying, you need to have a gun. It needs to be ready to go and have your ammunition. That's laughable. It's really kind of a sorry commentary. They all laugh about that because that's what it's supposed to be like. We're supposed to be ready to go at any moment to defend ourselves, right? And the last one, this is critical too. Militias were organized from the bottom up and not from the top down. Why does that matter? Okay, what if you guys were the militia? Okay? Yep. If your leader is from the top down, your loyalty is to your leader who's a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. If your leader is a local person who's been elected by the local company of militia, your loyalty is to that leader at the local level, and their loyalty back is to the people. Okay? So these concepts, you look at this, these make sense. These feel American. These feel right, because they are. And that's what a militia meant. When they said a well-regulated militia, that's what they meant, is a militia, not these modern-day ideas of what we think a militia is. All 5 of these points, you think those over. When I send you the email, look those over and think about them. They're pretty important. Okay, so well-regulated militia. I think this is part of what your question is here. Now, it isn't just the militia that's necessary for our security, okay? It's specifically a well-regulated militia that's absolutely critical. Now, we passionately stand for and say, I demand that I have my God-given right to defend myself. I demand that I have the right to keep and bear arms, okay? But it's not just the militia, it's a well-regulated militia. Because what if a standing army came against us and we all had our guns, we all ran out and we don't stand a chance. There's no way against a standing army. But what about a well-regulated militia? What about one that's been trained, has periodic inspections, knows how to drill, knows how to protect their own citizenry? A lot better chance, huh? Yeah. And what happens? Well, you're well-regulated. Okay, let's look at, oh, I thought I had a quote here. I'll get to it. What do militias do? Why are they necessary? Well, in a well-organized militia under the guidance of local leaders, a militia doesn't just get involved with defensive and armed endeavors. Okay? A well-regulated militia can provide natural disaster relief, emergency services, etc. Every able-bodied man is to have a direct involvement in our government. It's interesting, when you really think about direct involvement in the government, when you really are serious about it, there's probably only 2 ways you really think, I'm directly involved. One is when I vote, and one is when I pay taxes. That's what we think, right? What if you were part of a well-regulated militia? Would you be directly involved in your government? Yeah. On a periodic basis, you bet. And on issues where we need to help and supply natural disaster relief, etc., you're involved maybe on a daily basis, directly involved with your government. Think how good that would be. Think how much we'd take pride in who we are Instead of, well, that's for the politicians. No, it's me. I am the government, because we the people, establish this Constitution, right? Okay, so let's go on to this word security. Anybody want to guess how many times the word security shows up in the Constitution? Once. Anyone want to guess where? Yeah, the Second Amendment right there, okay? That's the only place in the whole Constitution where the word security shows up. Now, do we have national security issues today? Yeah. Do we have a militia today? No. So no wonder we have national security issues, okay? Now, it's also important when you look at this word security, you start to realize the reason they put that in there as well is to help us understand what's the purpose of the militia. Is it so we can shoot ducks? No, it says for security, to protect ourselves, okay? For that very basic purpose. It's important to understand that as well. Now, you have to, on this slide, you have to bear with me. I've done this presentation 5 or 6 times throughout the state, and some people don't like this slide. They think I'm just kind of philosophizing, but I think it's good, and I'm in charge, so you're going to see it. Okay? So security. Security and defense. Are those the same words? They're not, are they? Now, obviously, they're spelled different, but they're different as well, okay? Now, what if I further distinguish the term and I say that security is in anticipation of an offensive action, and defense is in reaction to an offensive action, okay? Or in other words, security is proactive. We hire a security guard to walk around and look for bad guys, right? Not just to sit there and wait for something to happen. Defense is more of a reactive. We're reacting to an offensive. Another way of looking at this, maybe security is a standing. It's always present. Standing meaning always there, always ready. Okay? Whereas defensive is more raised. And you may know where I'm going here. Standing army versus a raised army, a standing militia. The Constitution most definitely established the militia to be a standing body that's always there to provide for our security. Okay? They can be called on a moment's notice, ready to go. They don't have to be raised and trained, etc. They're already trained. They're already organized. They're already armed. Okay? Now, let's compare this to what it says in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 12, because now we're going to talk about raising armies. Congress shall have power to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. So is the militia the only constitutional organization who is proactively anticipating threats? Do we have is a standing army a constitutional body? A standing army is not a constitutional body. It's not in the Constitution. The Constitution says that Congress can raise an army, but what's the stipulation? For only 2 years. Okay? So that army, by definition, is a raised army. It's not a standing army. Is there a standing force that's always in place to protect us, our security? Yes, and who is that? Militia. Okay? Now, here's the quote that I was looking for earlier, and I think this is a really insightful quote by Noah Webster. Noah Webster is definitely a founding father. He wasn't part of the Constitutional Convention, but he's the one who wrote the dictionary, the 1828 dictionary, that defined the terms that were used in common language of those days. Noah Webster said this: before a come back, please. Okay. Wow. We'll see if that cuts off some of the other stuff. Oh well. Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed. When the whole body of the people are armed, they constitute a force superior to any bands of regular troops that can be, on any pretense, raised in the United States. When the people are armed, they constitute a force superior. So when you have the standing army, it pales in comparison when they come to tyrannize a local group or a state group that's already been training, well-armed, organized. There's no way they can tyrannize them, right? Because the militia is well-regulated and well-formulated. The Constitution puts in place a very good standing army, a standing body called the militia to protect us, okay? So he makes that good point there. Hopefully that doesn't, well, let's see, maybe we'll go back. Huh, I like that. I don't know what happened. I didn't touch anything. Okay, Madison says, a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained in arms is the best, most natural defense in a free country. Now, some people may be familiar with a quote by George Washington where he said that government is not reason, it's not eloquence, government is force. And if he's right that government is force, and if the Declaration of Independence is right, which says that government derives their just powers from the consent of the governed, in other words, government can only do those things that we as individuals have the power ourselves to do and then give to them our agent to use on our behalf. If those two things are true, then the logical conclusion is that we, the people, have the power to use force to defend ourselves. We don't just have to say, government, take care of us. No, we have that power. The way we know we have that power is because government derives their just powers from the consent of the governed. The governed have to have that power in the first place to give to them, to act on their behalf, their agent. Okay? So, the best way to do that, according to Madison, is through a well-regulated militia that's actually trained in arms. And this militia isn't just a bunch of ad hoc, get-together, fired-up, ticked-off people who have guns. It's a well-regulated, it's state-mandated and regulated. Okay? Regulated meaning trained, not regulations like we hear today, but the word regulated means to have some order, some organization. So let's look at this a little bit more closely. This to me is really interesting stuff. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16, talking about the militia, it says, Congress shall have power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. So I've got a question for you. If you guys understand the Founding Fathers how I do, I think we'll be in agreement here. Would the Founding Fathers who were organizing a limited government based on freedom from government tyranny mandate that the militia be directly controlled by the federal government? Would they do that? Would they say, oh man, we got this militia here, and they're the basic source for protection. Let's make them accountable to the federal government. Let's make the federal government in charge of them. Would they do that? That doesn't make sense. That's contradictory. So some people read this and go, well, wait a second. It says right there, though, Congress shall have power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. Let me give you another way of looking at this. I've done some research in Webster's Dictionary about provide for, what that actually means, and it supports this idea. Let me throw some ideas at you. Could it be that the constitutional mandate for a well-regulated militia was written into the Constitution to legally bind the government to provide for the establishment of the entity that would be most obnoxious to any plans by any government at any level to use force to control the people? Could it be that the founders said you have to have a militia in there in order to check your power, in order to check your force of arms? Is there any wonder there isn't a well-regulated militia today? The government's biggest opponent, a well-regulated militia, doesn't even exist. Okay? Another way of looking at it, here's kind of the contextual behind what Webster considers this provided for means. You could look at this and say, Congress shall have power to guarantee that the militia be organized, armed, and disciplined. Or another way, Congress shall have power to provide for the establishment of the militia at the local level. Okay? Contextually, that's what it means. Okay? And the reason I suggest that is for logic itself, but also the very second Congress of the United States in 1792, the second Congress, they passed on May 8th, 1792, the Second Militia Act of 1792. And what did they say here? They said that they conscripted every free, able-bodied white male citizen between the ages of 18 and 45 into a local militia company. So they exercised the power in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16, to conscript every man to be a part of a local militia, not to be part of a national militia, a local militia. That supports the idea we're talking about, right? Congress saying, get in those local militias, make sure those are there. Okay? Secondly, it says the members are to arm themselves. This official act of Congress is members are to arm themselves. Here it says Congress is supposed to arm them. No, that's not what it says. It says Congress is making sure this happens at the local level. They're making sure that the militias exist at the local level and that they're armed. They're organized. They're functioning. Not that we're in charge of them. We control you. Okay? Kind of goes along with the idea of Article 4. Article 4, Section 4 talks about the U.S. being in charge of making sure that every state has a Republican form of government. Does that mean the United States controls the states? No. It just means they guarantee that every state has a Republican form of government. Same idea. Congress is in charge of making sure that happens. Let's go on with Clause 16. For governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. Can Congress make rules about the governing of state militias? According to the Constitution, yes. But only when the militias are employed in the service of the United States. Otherwise, their governor and state laws govern them. We'll talk more about this in a second. Fourth part of this, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia. So what does each state do with the militia? They're in charge of them. They appoint officers. They train them.
So isn't this really just akin to the National Guard?
That's a good question. That's what everyone brings up. And I think I planted you in the audience. We're going to get to National Guard in just a second. And we'll look at that.
I keep saying you're going to get to things.
I'm sorry. Yes?
The 1792 Act, is that still in effect?
No. No, that's part of it. The 1792 Act was preempted by a 1903 Act, the Militia Act of 1903 that created the National Guard. Okay? Now, the last part here, this is interesting. According to the discipline prescribed by Congress, states can train the militias, but only according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Why would that be? Who provides the standards for training? Congress. Okay? Why would Congress provide that? Because it follows the principle of federalism, the idea that the federal government should only do those things that the states can't do on their own. Can a state that's very well organized, very well armed, very well equipped, can they make another state also be very well armed, organized, and equipped? No, it's a sovereign state. They can't do anything. So what do? You take it to the next level up and you allow Congress to make sure the training standards are the same. Because whether a neighboring state is well armed and equipped and organized or not, does that have an effect upon the national security of the nation as a whole? You bet. But since the state can't make that happen, Congress makes that happen, says you have to do this. So these ideas support this, that these local militias, these militias exist at the local level, but they're not answerable to the nation, to the federal government. They exist at the local level. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Yeah. Did this take hold back in 1792? Were these militias actually formed in the state?
Yeah. Yeah, and they had periodic training, all that stuff.
Foreign idea to us today.
Yeah, it's completely foreign today. But it was common sense back then. It was, I imagine they wrote that 1792 Act knowing, well, everyone knows what this is. We may as well write the Act. Well, because they'd already had these militias. The militias are what provided the arms for winning our independence in the Revolutionary War.
How long did they persist?
Depending on each state, obviously. But 1903 is when the official kibosh was put on it, when they changed it and said it's now the National Guard. And things changed quite a bit. Okay, so now let's get to Clause 15, the clause before. All right? Congress shall have power to provide for calling forth the militia. So who can call forth the militia? Congress, right? But the militia, they're governed by who? The states. So Congress has to call them forth from who? From the governor. Okay? Call them forth, say, we want to use the militia. And they can ask that question to the governor, and the governor can say yes or no. And it has happened in the past where the government said no. I think you're tyrannizing. You want to go and tyrannize Virginia with my militia. We're not going to let you do that. That's happened in the past. There's a check. That's called the check and balance. The states checking the federal power. Okay? Now, the last part of Clause 15, to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, repel invasions. There's only 3 functions, according to the Constitution, that the militia can get involved in. I'm going to give you 2 categories, external and internal. You tell me if these sound external or internal. Execute the laws of the Union. Internal. Suppress insurrections. And repel invasions. Internal. Because you're repelling it, right? The invasion comes, you're internally repelling those. These are all internal functions. The militia isn't an external body, they're an internal body. They're a defensive force, a standing force to protect and provide security. Okay, so all this is making sense. The Constitution very much lays this all out. Okay, only those 3 functions. We'll get to that in a second.